Helen's legs buckled beneath her as she tried to stand up. A sharp, searing pain shot through her calf, and she gasped, clutching the edge of her nightstand for support. The room spun, and her heart pounded as if she had just run a marathon, even though she'd been lying down for hours. Her once strong legs, which had carried her through years of teaching, walking the beach, and hiking with her daughter Megan, now felt like fragile sticks. This wasn't the first time it had happened, but this time felt different. More intense. More frightening. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The cramp wouldn't let go. It had been creeping up on her more often lately. At first, it had been just a mild twinge in the night, but now it was a full-on battle that left her immobilized and shaken. "I can't keep doing this," Helen muttered under her breath. Helen was 72. A retired teacher with a lifetime of experiences tucked into the corners of her mind, she never expected that her greatest battle would be with something as seemingly mundane as her legs. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She had lived a full life, the kind of life you read about in travel magazines, with stories of sunsets in Hawaii, family dinners around a wooden table, and moments of quiet reflection while watching the waves crash on a distant shore. Yet now, at this stage of her life, the simple act of standing up had become an ordeal. Her thoughts raced. What would happen if this continued? What if one day she couldn't walk at all? She sat back down on the edge of her bed, trying to rub the pain from her leg, but it only seemed to intensify. She winced and glanced toward the window where the morning sun began to light up her room. The day had barely begun, yet already, her body felt like a ticking clock, reminding her that time, and her health, was slipping away. What would she do then? What if, one day, she couldn't walk at all? Helen wasn't ready for that. She wasn't ready to give up the one thing she had taken for granted her entire life. Her independence. The freedom to get up, walk outside, go to the grocery store, or simply walk to the mailbox. She wasn't ready to be dependent on anyone. Especially not her daughter, Megan. "I'll figure this out," she whispered to herself, determined. As the cramp in her leg finally released its grip, Helen slowly stood up again, this time with more care. She limped to the bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror. Her hair, silver and tied in a loose bun, was streaked with gray. Her face, once bright and full of energy, now had faint lines of worry etched into it. "You've been through worse," she thought. She had survived heartbreak, loss, and the challenges that came with raising Megan as a single mother. A cramp, no matter how painful, shouldn't be the thing that broke her. But as she adjusted the water temperature in the shower, she couldn't help but wonder, what if this was only the beginning? The thought nagged at her as she took a long, soothing shower. Helen knew something had to change. She couldn't go on like this. The aches, the pains, the cramping, they were all signs of something more. She wasn't ready to admit it, but deep down, she knew this wasn't just age. This was her body sending a message, loud and clear. The problem was that she didn't know what to do about it. Sure, she could take painkillers or rub ointments on her legs, but nothing seemed to help. Every day felt like a gamble. Will today be the day she wakes up and can't walk? The thought was terrifying. That evening, Megan came over for their usual dinner. They'd always been close, even though Megan had her own family now. But there was no denying the concern that had grown in Megan's eyes whenever she saw her mom struggle with a cramp or a stiff joint. "Mom, you okay?" Megan asked as she walked in the door, her brow furrowed. Helen smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I'm fine. Just a little cramp this morning, but nothing to worry about." Megan didn't look convinced. She placed a bag of groceries on the kitchen counter, then turned to her mom with that familiar, loving but serious look in her eyes. "You can't keep ignoring this, Mom. You've got to take care of yourself. You're not getting any younger." Helen winced, not from the physical pain, but from the truth in her daughter's words. She knew Megan was right, but admitting it aloud would make it real. The cramping, the stiffness, the weakness in her legs, it was all happening faster than she had anticipated. "I'll figure it out," Helen said again, but this time it wasn't so confident. "I just need to find the right way to fix it. Maybe I'll start stretching more, or doing some of those exercises you see on TV." Megan wasn't convinced, but she didn't push it. She had learned over the years that sometimes, her mother needed time to come around. As they sat down to eat, Megan casually brought up something she had read in a health article. "Did you know that vitamins and nutrients can actually help with leg cramps? There are a few, especially for people our age, that are supposed to work wonders." Helen paused mid-bite, intrigued but skeptical. "Vitamins? You think a few pills are going to fix this?" "Well, no," Megan replied, shaking her head. "But, it's not just pills. It's about getting the right vitamins into your system through food and supplements. You'd be surprised what a difference it can make." Helen wasn't sold, but Megan's words stayed with her long after she finished her meal. Could it really be that simple? Could vitamins be the key to feeling better? She wasn't sure yet, but one thing was certain: she was tired of feeling helpless. She was going to find out what could help her legs. What if the answer wasn't just in waiting for it to get worse? What if it was in taking action? As Helen sat back in her chair, rubbing the sore spot in her calf, she realized that this might be the start of something new. Something that could change her life for the better. So, she made a decision: tomorrow, she would take the first step toward figuring this out. No more waiting. No more ignoring the problem. She stood up, slowly but steadily. She had a feeling that, this time, she was going to get to the bottom of it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Helen sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of chamomile tea, the steam rising in delicate swirls. It was moments like this, the quiet hours of the morning before the world around her awoke, when she often found herself reflecting on her life. She thought about her younger years, when she could run for miles without thinking twice, her legs carrying her as effortlessly as the wind. She had been a teacher for over 30 years, guiding children with the same patience and enthusiasm every day. But those days felt so far behind her now. Her eyes lingered on the family pictures lined up across the kitchen counter. There was the photo of her with Megan on her graduation day, proud and smiling, both of them unaware of how quickly time would change. Then there was the picture of them at the beach, the last vacation they'd taken before Megan had gotten married. Helen smiled at the memory of those simpler times. Back then, her body was her ally. She never thought twice about climbing a flight of stairs or walking to the corner store. But now, each movement came with hesitation. It wasn't just the occasional cramps that plagued her, it was the stiffness, the aching joints, the feeling that her body was slowly betraying her. Helen's thoughts drifted to the day Megan had been born. She was young, barely in her 20s, but motherhood had come easily to her. Megan had been a happy baby, then a curious child, always asking questions and constantly on the move. Helen had watched her grow, feeling proud but also nostalgic for the days when she was the center of Megan's world. But things had changed over time. Megan had grown into a woman with her own life, her own family. Helen had never remarried after her divorce, choosing instead to focus on raising Megan and building a career that she loved. In a way, she had been content with that choice, but there were times, especially now, when she wished she had someone by her side to share the burden of growing older. Megan, on the other hand, had a husband and 2 children of her own now. She lived in a beautiful suburban home about half an hour away, busy with her family and her job. Helen couldn't help but feel a twinge of loneliness sometimes, particularly when Megan would call and speak to her in that concerned, almost parental tone. It was clear that Megan had started seeing her mother less as an equal and more as someone who needed care and protection. But Helen wasn't ready for that. She didn't want to feel like a burden. She sipped her tea again, remembering the conversation she and Megan had had the night before. Megan had been gentle but insistent. "Mom, you need to take care of yourself. You can't keep ignoring this." Helen had brushed it off, pretending it was just a passing thought, but deep down, she knew Megan was right. The truth was, the leg cramps were getting worse, and Helen had been hiding it from everyone for as long as she could. She didn't want to admit it, but Megan's concern was hard to ignore. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when her body was clearly telling her otherwise. Helen set the mug down and stood, her legs a little more wobbly than usual. She walked over to the window, looking out over the small garden she had cultivated over the years. It was her pride and joy, the place where she spent hours in the summer, tending to the flowers and vegetables, grounding herself in nature. But even now, as she gazed at the rows of vibrant flowers, she noticed how her legs didn't seem to have the same strength they once did. The energy she once had to spend hours gardening had been replaced by exhaustion, and the aches that came with every movement were a reminder of how much had changed. What happened to the woman I used to be, she wondered. Helen had always prided herself on being independent. She had done it all on her own, raising Megan, managing a classroom full of students, and maintaining a home. She had been strong, capable, and had never once asked for help. But now, as she stood there, looking out at the garden, she realized that maybe it was time to start asking for help, or at least accepting it. The problem was, asking for help felt like surrendering. Surrendering to what? She wasn't sure. But it felt like giving up some part of herself, a part she wasn't ready to let go of. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, the sun barely making its presence known through the overcast sky. She walked carefully, slowly, her steps tentative, but she was determined to keep moving forward. One step at a time, she reminded herself. As she walked down the quiet street, she saw the elderly couple who lived next door, both hunched over, holding each other's arms for support. It wasn't unusual to see them like that, but today, Helen found herself thinking about them more than usual. They had both lived in the same house for decades, raised their children, and now, in their later years, they were still there, still side by side. They were in the same position as her, she thought. Old age had crept up on them, just as it had crept up on her. But what was different about them was that they had each other. They leaned on each other when they needed to. They didn't try to go it alone. Helen looked down at her own hands, suddenly aware of how tight her grip was on the railing. She was strong, yes. But she was also tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying the weight of everything by herself. Maybe it's time to let go, she thought. When she returned inside, Megan had left a message on the answering machine, asking if Helen had given any thought to what they talked about the night before. Helen smiled softly, picking up the phone. She wasn't sure how to respond, but she knew she would have to face it eventually. She couldn't keep ignoring the signs. And so, with a deep breath, Helen resolved that today would be the day she took that first step towards something new. Not just for her body, but for her mind and soul as well. Maybe it was time to listen to her daughter's advice. After all, vitamins and nutrients weren't just for the body. They were a reminder that sometimes, we needed to nourish not only our physical selves, but our emotional and spiritual well-being too. With that thought, Helen turned to the kitchen counter and began to research vitamins that could help her legs. It was time to make a change. The next morning, Helen woke up feeling slightly better. The cramp from yesterday had dissipated, but her legs still felt stiff, as though they hadn't quite forgiven her for the way she had pushed them to their limits. She took her time getting dressed, her movements slower than usual, but she managed. After breakfast, Helen sat down at her computer, determined to find something that could help her. She typed in vitamins for leg cramps and was immediately bombarded with a long list of results. The internet was full of advice, some of it sensible, some of it downright strange. She clicked on one of the first links that appeared, a health website promising to offer natural solutions for common ailments. Helen scrolled through the page, reading about the various vitamins and minerals that were said to alleviate muscle cramps and improve leg strength. Potassium, magnesium, calcium, and vitamin D were frequently mentioned. She was surprised to learn that dehydration could also be a contributing factor, as well as a lack of certain nutrients in her diet. Interesting, she murmured to herself. It made sense, she hadn't really been paying attention to her diet recently. A busy life, a love of comfort food, and a few too many cups of coffee had left her nutrition lacking. Maybe it was time to change that. Helen made a list of the recommended vitamins. Magnesium, potassium, calcium, and vitamin D. She'd heard of most of them but wasn't entirely sure how they worked. Feeling motivated, she decided to go to the local health store to pick up a few supplements. She wasn't sure whether it was the vitamins themselves or the act of doing something about her condition that would give her relief, but either way, she was determined to try. As she walked into the store, the familiar scent of essential oils and herbal teas filled the air, and she felt a sense of calm wash over her. It was strange how something as simple as walking through these aisles could make her feel as though she was doing something proactive about her health. There was a small section dedicated to supplements for joint and muscle health. Helen browsed through the rows of bottles, feeling somewhat overwhelmed. There were so many options: powders, pills, capsules, and liquids. Each one claimed to be the miracle solution for leg cramps and muscle pain. The store attendant, a friendly woman in her 30s, noticed Helen's hesitation. "Can I help you find something today?" she asked with a smile. "I'm looking for something to help with leg cramps," Helen said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've been having them a lot lately. I thought I might try a supplement." "Of course," the woman said, walking over to the shelves. "We have a lot of options for that. Magnesium is a big one for leg cramps, and we also have potassium supplements. If you're feeling a little more adventurous, there are also herbal remedies like turmeric and ginger, which are known for reducing inflammation." Helen nodded, her mind racing with the possibilities. Magnesium was on her list, and the idea of something natural, like turmeric, seemed appealing. After a few more minutes of discussion, she settled on a magnesium supplement and a bottle of turmeric capsules. "Will these really help?" Helen asked, her voice low, almost as if she were asking herself more than the attendant. The woman smiled reassuringly. "It's worth a try. Many people find relief with magnesium, especially for muscle cramps. But remember, it might take some time to notice a difference. Give it a few weeks and see how you feel." Helen thanked the attendant and left the store with her new purchases in hand, unsure of what to expect but hopeful nonetheless. She wasn't expecting a miracle, but perhaps, just perhaps, this was the first step toward reclaiming her life. When she got home, she took a seat at the kitchen table and opened the bottles of supplements. She read the instructions carefully, a part of her still skeptical that something so simple could help. "Take 1 tablet daily," the bottle of magnesium read. "Take 2 capsules daily with food," the turmeric bottle instructed. Helen set the bottles down, looking out the window again at her garden. This was it. No more excuses. No more waiting for a miracle. She was going to try, and that was the first step. The next few days were a whirlwind of adjustments. She took her supplements religiously, along with drinking more water and trying to make healthier food choices. Megan called to check in, and Helen found herself telling her daughter all about the vitamins she had started taking. Megan was pleased, but she also reminded her mom to be patient. "You might not feel the effects right away," Megan said. "But if this helps, that's great. I'm proud of you for taking charge of your health." "I'm trying, Megan," Helen said, the words sounding almost like a confession. She wasn't sure if the vitamins were making a difference yet, but she promised herself she wouldn't give up. A week later, Helen felt a slight change. The cramps didn't seem as frequent, and when they did occur, they weren't as intense. She had more energy and didn't feel as stiff in the mornings. The pain wasn't gone, but it was bearable. She could walk to the store without feeling like every step was a battle, and that was progress. But with the improvements came new doubts. Helen had been so focused on finding a solution that she hadn't stopped to think about whether the cramps were just a part of aging, something she had to accept. Maybe her legs were just showing signs of wear and tear, the natural result of years of use. Was this all in her head? Maybe the vitamins were a placebo, a psychological comfort rather than a real fix. Her mind raced with these questions, and the more she thought about them, the more conflicted she became. What if this wasn't the answer? What if she had just wasted time and money? She wanted to believe that this was the right path, that the solution was simple. But something deep inside her wondered if she was fooling herself. As the days went on, Helen's doubts lingered. She still had cramps, though not as often. But was this just part of the process? Or was she just delaying the inevitable? The sun was setting, casting a soft golden glow across the room as Helen sat on the couch, her legs stretched out in front of her. She had just returned from a walk to the nearby park, something she had been doing almost every day since starting the new supplements. It had become part of her routine, a small but significant act of taking control of her health. The walk had been peaceful, but by the time she got home, her legs were aching more than usual. Maybe I pushed it too far today, Helen muttered to herself, rubbing her right calf with her hand. She had walked an extra mile, just to test if her legs could handle it. They couldn't. She winced, feeling that familiar tightness in her muscles. The cramps hadn't been as severe as they used to be, but today, it felt like the universe was sending her a message, "You're not quite there yet." She reached for her phone and dialed Megan's number, wanting to share her experience. It rang a few times before Megan picked up. "Hey, Mom. How's it going?" Megan's cheerful voice brought a small smile to Helen's face, but it was short-lived. "I don't know, Megan," Helen said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I did what you suggested. I've been taking the vitamins, drinking more water, eating healthier. But today, I overdid it. My legs are killing me. I walked too far." Megan sighed on the other end. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. But remember, you can't push yourself too hard all at once. It's not going to be an instant fix." Helen felt a sharp pang of irritation. I know, but I just want to feel like I'm getting somewhere. It's hard to accept that I might never be able to walk like I used to. I'm not sure if these vitamins are really doing anything." There was a pause, and then Megan said gently, "It's okay to feel frustrated, Mom. I get it. But you've made progress. Maybe you're not where you want to be yet, but you're doing something. And that counts for something." Helen swallowed hard, the weight of Megan's words sinking in. But the ache in her legs wouldn't go away. How much longer could she keep up this fight? She didn't have the answers, and the uncertainty was weighing on her. That night, Helen lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The cramps hadn't subsided as she had hoped, and the pain seemed to have settled deeper, almost like a constant companion. Her thoughts swirled in an endless loop, cycling between self-doubt and frustration. She was tired. Tired of feeling like she was running in place, tired of trying to convince herself that she wasn't aging as fast as her body seemed to be telling her. Was she fighting a losing battle? Her mind kept returning to the question, what if this is just what happens when you get older? What if these cramps, these aches and pains, were the price she had to pay for the years of running, dancing, and hiking, the years of living fully and without fear? The next morning, she woke up with a heavy heart. The soreness in her legs was still there, but it wasn't just the physical discomfort that bothered her. It was the emotional toll. Every time she took a step and felt the strain, it was a reminder that she wasn't the woman she once was. Her independence, the freedom she once took for granted, seemed to be slipping further away. She got up slowly, stretching her legs cautiously before walking into the kitchen. The vitamins sat on the counter, as if waiting for her to make a decision. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she should take them today. Was she fooling herself? She wondered if the vitamins were simply masking the inevitable decline of her body. Should I just accept that this is part of aging? Helen sighed and made her coffee, trying to shake off the weight of her thoughts. She wasn't ready to give up entirely, but the path she was walking felt uncertain. She had expected results faster. She had expected progress, not this constant back and forth between hope and despair. When Megan called later that day, Helen didn't immediately pick up. She didn't want to disappoint her daughter with her doubts. But eventually, she answered. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to check in. How's everything going?" Megan asked, her voice full of care. Helen hesitated, her hand gripping the phone tightly. "Not great, Megan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I pushed myself too far yesterday. And now, I'm not sure if this is all worth it. I don't know if the vitamins are really helping. I'm just tired. Tired of waiting for something to change." There was a long pause on the other end, and Helen could hear Megan thinking carefully before she spoke. "I know this is frustrating, Mom. And I know you've been working really hard at this. But I also think that it's okay to feel uncertain. You're not failing just because you haven't figured it out yet. You're just on a journey. And journeys aren't always linear." Helen took a deep breath, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. A journey. Maybe that was the answer she needed. She wasn't just fighting the cramps. She was fighting the fear of change, the fear of not being able to keep up with the pace of life she had set for herself. "I think I understand," Helen said softly. "I've been so focused on the results that I forgot to appreciate the progress. Even if it's small, it's progress." Megan's voice softened. "Exactly. And we're in this together. So don't give up just yet, okay? Take it one day at a time." Helen nodded, even though Megan couldn't see it. She felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that she didn't have to face this alone. It wasn't about finding the perfect solution, but rather about the steps she was taking, the decision to fight for a better quality of life, even if it didn't happen overnight. After hanging up, Helen sat quietly for a while, reflecting on the conversation. She realized that the pain wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. And both needed time to heal. Maybe she had to accept that progress wasn't always immediate. Maybe it came in small, subtle ways that weren't always easy to see. And just maybe, this journey wasn't over. The following days were a blur of small changes, subtle shifts in Helen's daily routine that, though they might have seemed insignificant to others, felt monumental to her. She woke up each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, no longer focusing solely on the cramps but on the act of taking care of herself. It had been a week since her heart-to-heart with Megan, and Helen was starting to see things a little differently. She had decided that she wasn't going to let the pain define her, not anymore. But it wasn't about ignoring the pain either. It was about accepting that her body was going through a process of change, one that required patience, gentleness, and understanding. That morning, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in hand, gazing out at her garden. The flowers had started to bloom, and the leaves on the trees were greener than they had been in years. For the first time in a long while, Helen felt a sense of peace. The world around her was changing, and so was she. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from Megan. "How's today going? How are your legs feeling?" Helen smiled as she typed back, "Better. Still some discomfort, but I'm starting to accept that it's not all about getting rid of the pain. It's about learning how to live with it. Maybe that's the secret." She set her phone down, reflecting on the message. Maybe that was the secret. She had been so focused on eliminating the cramps, on finding a quick fix, that she hadn't stopped to consider the emotional weight of it all. The fear of aging, the fear of losing her independence, and the frustration of not being able to keep up with the pace of life she had always set for herself. But now, she understood, it wasn't just about the vitamins, the walks, or the stretches. It was about how she responded to the changes her body was going through. It was about finding balance and compassion within herself. After her morning coffee, Helen decided to take a walk. She no longer saw it as a test of her legs' endurance but as a gentle way to connect with her body. She bundled up in a light jacket and stepped out the door, breathing in the cool, crisp air. As she walked, she took a different route through the neighborhood, one that took her past the local park. She loved the park, the tall trees, the winding paths, and the ducks that swam peacefully in the small pond. The soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet had always been one of her favorite sounds. Today, though, she noticed something new. The park seemed different. It wasn't the trees or the pond, it was her. She wasn't rushing to get through the walk, as she used to. She wasn't measuring her progress or pushing herself to go farther. She was simply walking, enjoying the rhythm of her steps and the gentle breeze on her face. It was then that she realized something she hadn't fully understood before: healing wasn't just physical. It was emotional. She had spent so much time focusing on her body's pain that she had neglected the emotional weight that accompanied it. Accepting her aging body, learning to slow down, and embracing a new kind of strength were all parts of the healing process. As Helen reached the park's entrance, she spotted a bench under a large oak tree. She sat down, her legs tired but not in pain. For the first time in what felt like ages, she felt grateful for her body, despite its imperfections. She wasn't angry at it anymore. She wasn't resentful of the limitations it had placed on her. Instead, she felt a sense of appreciation for everything it had allowed her to do: the hikes, the travels, the dancing, and even the quiet mornings with coffee and good books. It wasn't about fighting her body, it was about working with it. Helen sat for a long while, just breathing in the fresh air and feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She hadn't felt this at peace in a long time. She thought about how far she had come since those first painful days of struggling with leg cramps, and how, even though she wasn't completely free of them, she was finding ways to manage the discomfort. She was learning, adapting, and most importantly, accepting. By the time she returned home, she felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because she had made peace with it. She had made peace with the idea that her body was changing and that it was okay. That evening, she took her vitamins as usual, but this time, she didn't do it with the same sense of urgency she had before. It wasn't about fixing something that was broken. It was about supporting her body in the best way she knew how. Helen smiled as she put the bottle of magnesium back in the cabinet. She was learning to trust the process. A few days later, Megan came by to visit. Helen greeted her at the door, and they hugged warmly, the weight of the conversation they had shared earlier in the week still lingering between them. "How's everything?" Megan asked, her eyes scanning her mom's face for any signs of frustration. Helen smiled softly, her hands resting on her hips. "It's good. I'm getting there. The cramps aren't gone, but I'm starting to see that it's more than just the physical pain. It's about how I approach it. I'm learning to listen to my body and take it one step at a time." Megan nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "That's really great, Mom. I'm proud of you." Helen squeezed her daughter's hand. "Thanks, sweetie. I think I've learned more than just how to take care of my legs. I've learned how to take care of myself." And for the first time in a long while, Helen truly felt like she was on the path to healing, not just physically, but emotionally too. This chapter highlights Helen's emotional growth as she learns to accept the changes in her body. The walk in the park serves as a metaphor for her newfound acceptance and peace, as she shifts her focus from trying to fix herself to learning how to embrace her journey. The following week brought with it a mixture of highs and lows. Helen continued with her daily routines, taking her vitamins, walking around the block, stretching her legs. She had even added a short yoga session to her morning routine, something that she hadn't done in years. All in all, she felt more in tune with her body than she had in a long time. But as with any journey, the path wasn't always smooth. One afternoon, after having lunch with a friend, Helen felt a familiar tightening in her calves. It wasn't the same kind of sharp pain she had experienced months ago, but it was enough to make her pause and catch her breath. She was sitting at her dining table, reading a book when the cramp started to creep in, subtle at first, then escalating quickly into something more painful. Her leg muscles contracted, and she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. "Not again," she whispered under her breath, her heart sinking. She had been feeling so optimistic, and now this. Helen tried to stand, but her legs buckled slightly beneath her, sending a jolt of panic through her. She hadn't had a cramp like this in days, and it felt like a punch in the gut, a reminder that no matter how much progress she had made, this pain wasn't going away. She stood still for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to calm herself. It was just a cramp. Just a cramp. But it felt like more than that. It felt like a setback. Her mind raced. Maybe she had overdone it with the yoga. Or maybe she had been too ambitious with the extra walk she took earlier that week. Could it be that the vitamins weren't really working after all? The thought was a heavy cloud hanging over her, threatening to undo the optimism she had felt recently. She grabbed her phone and texted Megan, "I've been doing so well lately, but today I don't know. My legs are giving me trouble again. I thought I was past this." Megan's reply came almost instantly, "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. But remember, healing isn't a straight line. You'll have good days and bad days. It's normal. Don't get discouraged." Helen reread the message, trying to absorb it. Don't get discouraged. She closed her eyes and sat back down, her mind spinning. It was so easy to fall into the trap of frustration. She wanted results, and she wanted them now. But the truth was, there were no shortcuts in healing. There was no magic pill, no quick fix that would make everything better overnight. It was a process, one that required patience and self-compassion. As she sat there, waiting for the cramp to subside, Helen began to realize something she hadn't fully acknowledged before: setbacks were part of the process. They didn't mean she was failing. They didn't mean that everything she had worked for was worthless. They were simply a natural part of the journey. Her breathing steadied, and the pain slowly eased. When the cramp finally released, she stood carefully, testing her legs. There was still a lingering discomfort, but it wasn't as severe as before. She walked to the kitchen, taking slow, deliberate steps. Helen found herself laughing quietly to herself. Here she was, worrying that the setback was the end of her progress, when in reality, it was just another bump in the road. She sat down at the kitchen table again, taking a moment to appreciate the lesson that the cramp had brought. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about always feeling good. It was about acknowledging the setbacks, learning from them, and continuing to move forward. Each time she faced a challenge, she could choose how to respond. And today, she had chosen to respond with grace, not frustration. When Megan called that evening, Helen answered with a lighter tone. "Hey, Mom. How's it going?" Megan asked, eager to hear how things were progressing. Helen smiled. "You were right. I had a setback today. The cramps came back a bit stronger than usual. But I'm okay now. It wasn't the end of the world. I just need to remind myself that it's not going to be smooth sailing all the time." Megan's voice softened with understanding. "I'm glad to hear you're okay. And you're right. It's all part of the process. You're doing great, Mom. Don't let one bad day take away from all the progress you've made." Helen nodded, feeling comforted by her daughter's words. "Thanks, sweetie. I think I needed to hear that. It's hard not to get discouraged, but I'm learning. One step at a time, right?" "Exactly. One step at a time." That evening, as Helen prepared for bed, she reflected on the day's events. The cramp had been painful, yes, but it hadn't defined her. The setback hadn't been the end of her journey, it had simply been another lesson in resilience. She had learned that even when things didn't go according to plan, she could still pick herself up and keep going. As she turned off the light and lay down to sleep, Helen felt a sense of peace settle over her. Healing wasn't about avoiding setbacks. It was about how you responded to them. And she was getting better at responding with patience, kindness, and a deep trust that she was on the right path. We see Helen confront the reality of setbacks, something that everyone on a healing journey eventually encounters. Rather than letting this derail her progress, she learns to accept it as part of the process, finding strength in her ability to keep going despite the challenges. This marks another step in her emotional and physical growth. It had been a few weeks since the setback, and Helen had made peace with the fact that not every day would be perfect. Some days her legs would feel tight, some days they wouldn't. Some days the cramps would come with an intensity that left her breathless, and other days they would be barely noticeable. But the important thing, she had learned, was that she could face these challenges without losing hope. One afternoon, as she was sipping tea in the living room, she received a call from her longtime friend, Sylvia. Sylvia and Helen had known each other since their early 20s, they had shared everything from relationship drama to career changes, and most recently, the challenges that came with aging. "Hey, you!" Sylvia's voice was as lively as ever, though Helen could hear the faint crackle of static on the line. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm good," Helen replied, smiling at the familiar warmth in her friend's voice. "I'm learning to take things day by day. Some days are better than others, but I'm hanging in there." "I'm so proud of you," Sylvia said. "You've always been so strong. You've got this, you know." Helen felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had never truly understood the depth of her friendships until recently. The people around her, Megan, Sylvia, even her neighbors, had been an unwavering source of strength, though she hadn't always allowed herself to lean on them. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Sylvia," Helen admitted, feeling a lump form in her throat. "You always know just what to say." Sylvia laughed lightly. "That's what friends are for, right? You know, I was thinking, maybe we should do something fun this weekend. It's been a while since we've gotten together, just the two of us. How about a trip to the beach?" Helen hesitated for a moment. A trip to the beach? The idea of walking on sand, especially in her current state, seemed daunting. But then she thought about it. She had been avoiding things like this for fear of her legs holding her back, but what if she went and simply enjoyed the day without worrying about whether her legs would hold up? "Actually," Helen said, her voice growing more confident, "I think that sounds great. I'll take it easy, but I'd love to spend the day with you. It's been too long." The weekend came quickly, and on Saturday morning, Helen found herself packing a small bag with sunscreen, a blanket, and her favorite book. She felt a flutter of excitement. It had been months since she had done something so spontaneous. The thought of spending the day at the beach with Sylvia, even if it meant walking slowly, was a welcome change from her usual routine. They arrived at the beach just as the sun was beginning to climb higher in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was calming, and the scent of saltwater filled the air. Helen closed her eyes for a moment, letting the serenity of the scene wash over her. As they walked along the shoreline, Sylvia stayed beside her, matching her slower pace. There was no pressure, no rush. They talked about everything and nothing, their children, old memories, and their plans for the future. Helen felt an overwhelming sense of peace as she walked slowly, her feet sinking slightly into the wet sand with each step. The cramps were nowhere in sight, and even though she was moving more slowly than she had in the past, it didn't matter. She was simply being, enjoying the moment for what it was. After a while, they found a spot to lay their blanket. Helen settled down, taking in the view of the sparkling ocean. The breeze was gentle, and she felt the tension in her body slowly melt away. Sylvia had brought a picnic basket, and they spent the next few hours lounging, eating, and reminiscing about their younger days. "See?" Sylvia said, nudging her gently. "You're doing it. You're enjoying the day without worrying about the cramps or your legs. That's the key, Helen. It's not about perfection, it's about living. Helen smiled at her friend. I think I'm finally starting to understand that. It's not about fighting the changes in my body. It's about embracing them and still finding joy in the simple things. Sylvia raised her glass of iced tea in a toast. To embracing change, and to knowing when it's okay to slow down. To that, Helen said, clinking her glass with Sylvia's, feeling a lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in months. As the day drew to a close, Helen realized just how much she had needed this time. It wasn't just about the physical relief she felt from the fresh air and gentle exercise, it was about reconnecting with the world outside of her pain. It was about allowing herself to be supported by the people who cared about her, and in doing so, finding strength in vulnerability. On the drive home, Helen reflected on the day. She had faced her fear, the fear of being held back by her body, and she had come through it not only unscathed, but empowered. She had allowed herself to experience the beauty of life without judgment, without self-imposed limitations. As the car rolled down the familiar streets toward home, Helen knew that this moment would stay with her, a reminder that she didn't have to walk this journey alone. The support of her loved ones, the willingness to open herself up to help, and the joy of simple moments, these were the things that would carry her through. When she arrived home that evening, Megan called to check in. How was the beach? She asked, sounding excited. It was perfect, Helen said, her heart full. I walked slowly, I rested when I needed to, and I let myself enjoy it. I realized something today, I've been too focused on the things I can't do instead of focusing on the things I can. I can still have fun. I can still experience joy. And that's what matters. Megan's voice was warm. I'm so proud of you, Mom. You're truly inspiring. Helen chuckled, feeling a sense of pride that came from knowing she was on the right path. Thanks, sweetie. It's not easy, but I'm getting there. Helen learns the power of emotional support from her friend Sylvia and the importance of reconnecting with her community. The trip to the beach is a symbolic moment where she embraces her limitations but also realizes the value of enjoying life despite them. It marks a turning point in her journey toward self-acceptance and resilience. The day after her trip to the beach with Sylvia, Helen woke up feeling surprisingly good. The familiar stiffness in her legs was still there, but it didn't seem as overwhelming as it had been in the past. She had a lightness to her step, a new sense of optimism that had been ignited by her time away from the everyday routine. As she sipped her morning coffee, she thought about the changes she had made in her life recently, adding in her daily vitamins, being mindful of her hydration, and even pushing herself to take that short walk every day. She had started feeling like these small actions, while seemingly insignificant, were adding up to something much bigger than she had originally realized. Helen grabbed her phone and typed a quick message to Megan, I'm thinking it might be time to learn a little more about vitamins and leg health. I feel like I'm getting somewhere, but I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can. Megan's reply came almost immediately, I think that's a great idea, Mom. There's a lot of information out there, but I can help you find some good sources. The right vitamins can make a big difference. Helen smiled and put down her phone. She appreciated how involved Megan was in her journey. Megan's support, from the small daily check-ins to helping her navigate the vast world of health information, was invaluable. It had been a turning point in Helen's healing process to realize that she didn't have to do it all alone. Her family, her friends, and now the knowledge at her fingertips were all part of the support system she needed to keep moving forward. That afternoon, after finishing some household chores, Helen sat down at her computer. She began reading articles about leg cramps, muscle health, and the role that vitamins played in maintaining strength. It didn't take long before she stumbled upon a well-known health website that outlined the top vitamins for seniors to improve muscle function and reduce cramping. The information seemed straightforward, but Helen was determined to understand it all. She needed to know how each vitamin worked in her body and which ones would help her specifically. The list she found included vitamin D, vitamin B12, magnesium, potassium, calcium, vitamin E, and omega-3 fatty acids. Each of these nutrients played a key role in maintaining muscle health, nerve function, and reducing inflammation. Some were more well known than others, but Helen knew this was only the beginning. As she read, she felt empowered. She was learning how to take charge of her health, and that knowledge made her feel more in control of her journey. Helen knew that vitamin D was crucial for muscle function and bone health, and it was clear that many older adults were deficient in it. She had heard about its importance, but reading about it in detail made her realize just how much it influenced her muscles and overall health. Next, she read about vitamin B12, which helped maintain nerve function. This was something she hadn't considered before, but it made perfect sense. She'd experienced tingling sensations in her legs from time to time, and now she understood that it could be linked to a deficiency in B12. Magnesium was another vitamin that stood out to her, as it helped with muscle relaxation. This was the key to preventing cramps, and Helen made a note to check her magnesium levels. Potassium, calcium, vitamin E, and omega-3s rounded out the list, and Helen read each section with increasing interest. It was clear to her now that maintaining healthy muscles was more than just exercising and staying active. It was about providing her body with the right nutrients, something she could easily incorporate into her daily routine. It didn't have to be overwhelming. By the time she finished reading, she felt like she had a new plan in place. She made a list of foods that were rich in these vitamins: leafy greens, fish, nuts, seeds, dairy, and fortified cereals. She also considered adding a few new supplements to her routine to ensure she was getting the necessary nutrients she might be lacking. It seemed like a lot to process, but in reality, it wasn't too difficult to start making small changes. The next day, Helen went to the grocery store with a new sense of purpose. She picked up fresh spinach, bananas, salmon, and a few bottles of vitamins. As she stood in the health section of the store, she also picked up a bottle of magnesium supplements and a vitamin D spray. She didn't need to overdo it, she just needed to start somewhere. That evening, Helen sat down to dinner with Megan. They talked about the things she had learned and what she planned to add to her routine. Megan was so supportive, offering suggestions and reminding her that there was no rush. "Take it one step at a time, Mom. It's about consistency, not perfection," she said with a smile. Helen nodded, feeling grateful for Megan's encouragement. "I know," she said, her voice steady. "It feels good to have a plan, to know that I'm doing something positive for my body. And to be honest, I feel more confident knowing that there are things I can do, small things, but they add up." "You're doing great," Megan said. "I'm so proud of you. And remember, this is all about finding a balance. Don't be too hard on yourself if it takes time to see results." Later that evening, as Helen prepared for bed, she reflected on how far she had come. A few months ago, she had felt stuck in a cycle of pain, frustration, and uncertainty. Now, she was learning, growing, and taking control of her health in a way that felt empowering. She realized that while healing wasn't always fast or easy, it was always possible when she had the right tools and the right mindset. The next morning, as she took her vitamins with breakfast, Helen couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. She knew it wouldn't be a magic cure, but this new understanding of her body, of the nutrients it needed, was a powerful tool. And with every small step, she felt herself growing stronger, both physically and mentally. Helen dives into the power of knowledge, discovering the role vitamins and nutrients play in maintaining muscle health and preventing cramps. She takes control of her health journey by learning about the vitamins that support her legs and incorporating them into her daily routine. This marks another key step in her healing process, not just relying on external sources of support, but also actively educating herself and taking responsibility for her well-being. The weeks passed, and with each new day, Helen felt a little bit stronger. She had been consistent with her vitamin regimen and had started incorporating more of the foods that supported her leg health into her meals. Spinach salads, grilled salmon, and smoothies packed with bananas and almond butter had become staples in her diet. She even took her magnesium supplement every night before bed, as she'd read that it helped with muscle relaxation and better sleep. But it wasn't just the physical changes she was noticing. It was the mental shift. Where once she had felt overwhelmed by her limitations, now she approached each day with a sense of calm determination. She had accepted that the road ahead would not always be smooth, but she also knew that she had the tools and knowledge to handle the bumps along the way. One afternoon, after her usual walk around the block, Helen sat on her porch steps, wiping the sweat from her brow. She had completed her walk without a single cramp, something that, just a few weeks ago, would have been unthinkable. She smiled to herself, allowing the quiet satisfaction of the moment to sink in. It was small, but it was progress. As she leaned back, taking a deep breath of the fresh air, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sylvia. "How are the legs today? Feeling strong?" Helen grinned. Sylvia had been checking in regularly, always encouraging, always supportive. It had been a few weeks since their beach trip, and while Helen still had days where her legs felt stiff, she could tell that she was making real strides. "Actually, yes." Helen typed back, "I just finished my walk with no cramps. I'm feeling better than I have in months. It's amazing what some vitamins and better habits can do." Sylvia's reply came almost immediately, "That's fantastic. You've been so dedicated. I'm proud of you." Helen felt a warm glow spread through her. The support of her friends had become a cornerstone of her journey. There was something special about knowing she wasn't in this alone. Even when the progress was slow, she had people around her who celebrated the small victories with her. Later that evening, Megan stopped by for dinner, as she did every Thursday. The two of them sat at the kitchen table, enjoying a hearty vegetable stew that Helen had made from scratch. As they talked, Helen mentioned the walk she had just completed. Megan looked at her with pride. "I'm so happy for you, Mom. I can see the difference. You've been working so hard at this, and it's paying off." Helen smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't experienced in a long time. "It feels good, you know. I never thought that making these little changes, the vitamins, the diet, would add up to something so noticeable. I'm learning to listen to my body, and it's starting to respond in ways I didn't expect." Megan nodded. "You're doing great. And it's not just about the physical improvements. It's about how you're taking charge of your health. You've always been someone who goes after what you want. This is just another example of that." Helen's heart swelled with gratitude. Megan's words hit home in a way that was hard to describe. In many ways, it had taken Helen most of her life to truly realize the power she had over her own well-being. For so long, she had viewed her aging body as something to be managed, something to fight against. But now, she was learning to embrace it, to work with it, to take the time to nourish it the way it deserved. As dinner came to an end, Helen cleared the table and sat down to relax. She couldn't help but think about how far she had come. Just a few months ago, the thought of doing something as simple as taking a walk without cramping seemed impossible. Now, she was taking longer walks, stretching more regularly, and feeling stronger with each passing day. But Helen knew that this wasn't the finish line. She understood now that healing was a continuous process. There would always be days where her body would challenge her, where her legs would feel tight, or where the cramps would return. But now, she had the confidence and the knowledge to manage those moments. She wasn't afraid of them anymore. The next morning, Helen woke up early to do her usual stretching routine. As she gently moved her body through the stretches, she noticed something else: her posture felt better. She wasn't slouching as much, and her lower back, which had sometimes ached in the past, was no longer a constant source of discomfort. It was as though everything in her body was starting to realign, a result of not only the vitamins but also the attention she had given to her overall health. She hadn't just been focusing on her legs, she had been giving her whole body the care it needed. Helen finished her routine with a sense of accomplishment. She felt the familiar twinge of pride that came from knowing that the little steps were adding up to something bigger. Later that afternoon, she decided to take another walk. This time, she walked a little farther than she had in the past. She still moved at a slower pace, but she felt more in control. She had learned not to push herself too hard, but instead to celebrate the steady progress. With every step, she felt more in tune with her body, more connected to the present moment. As she returned home and sat down on the porch again, she looked out at the neighborhood around her. The world seemed bigger, fuller, and she felt ready to take on whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, Helen understood the true value of patience. It wasn't about rushing to an end goal, it was about appreciating each step along the way. Small wins. Big gains. Every day was a victory in itself. Helen looked up at the sky, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. Helen experiences the tangible benefits of her consistent efforts to take care of her body. The small wins, like completing a walk without cramps, begin to add up and boost her confidence. She also deepens her understanding of the importance of patience and listening to her body, reinforcing that recovery and progress are ongoing processes. Helen had been feeling great, better than she had in years. But like all healing journeys, there were ups and downs. One Thursday morning, after a particularly restless night, she woke up to find that her legs felt tight and sore again. It was as though the progress she had made was being erased in an instant. She groaned softly as she swung her legs over the side of the bed, wincing at the discomfort. The cramps from the night before had faded by morning, but the stiffness remained, a constant reminder that the road ahead wasn't always going to be smooth. For a moment, Helen considered staying in bed, pulling the covers over her head, and letting the day slip by. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it felt as though she was back at square one. Her legs felt heavy, and the thought of going for a walk or doing her stretches felt daunting. But then she remembered what Megan had said to her just a few days earlier, "Take it one step at a time, Mom. You're not going to see results every day, but the effort will always count." Megan was right. Healing wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. Helen took a deep breath, gathered her strength, and stood up. Her legs protested, but she ignored the discomfort and shuffled over to the bathroom. She splashed cold water on her face and looked at herself in the mirror. "You've got this," she whispered to herself, trying to summon the same determination she had felt the past few weeks. The truth was, Helen knew that setbacks were a part of any journey. She had learned this in other areas of her life, from her career to her relationships. It wasn't always about avoiding challenges, it was about how you responded to them. After a quick breakfast, Helen decided to stick with her routine. She knew that rest was important, but so was keeping her body moving. So, instead of her usual walk, she opted for some gentle stretches. She focused on loosening her hamstrings, calves, and quads, areas that she knew tended to tighten when she didn't stay on top of them. By the time she finished, she felt a little better. Not great, but better. And that was enough for today. She had learned that it wasn't about forcing her body to be perfect, it was about showing up, no matter how she felt. As the day went on, the stiffness in her legs gradually subsided. By the afternoon, she was able to take a short walk around the block, though she kept a slower pace than usual. The cramps didn't return, but she was still cautious. She took it easy, paying attention to her body's signals. When Megan came over later that evening, Helen shared her experience. "I woke up feeling really off today," Helen confessed as they sat at the kitchen table. "I thought I had taken a few steps backward, but I just pushed through it. Did my stretches, kept moving, and now I'm feeling a little better." Megan smiled and nodded. "That's exactly it, Mom. It's all about listening to your body. There are going to be good days, and there are going to be hard days. But every time you don't let a setback stop you, that's progress." Helen sighed in relief. It was comforting to hear that from Megan, that her approach was the right one. There was no need to beat herself up for having a tough day. What mattered was the consistency, the effort, and the willingness to continue even when things weren't perfect. Over the next few days, Helen stuck to her routine, but she also gave herself more grace. When her legs felt tight, she didn't push them too hard. She focused on gentle movements and allowed herself time to rest when she needed it. By the end of the week, the stiffness in her legs had mostly faded. She was back to walking longer distances again and had resumed her regular stretches. Although the setback had been frustrating, it had also taught her something important, that healing wasn't linear. It was a journey with peaks and valleys, and each day was a chance to do better, even if it didn't look exactly how she had imagined. One evening, as Helen sat on the porch watching the sunset, she reflected on everything she had learned so far. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would still be days when things didn't go according to plan. But she had come so far, far enough that she could see real, tangible improvements in her strength and mobility. And even more importantly, she had learned to trust herself again. She had learned that setbacks weren't failures, they were simply part of the process. Small wins, big gains, she whispered to herself with a smile, remembering her mantra. One step at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Helen had been feeling good, perhaps better than she had in years. Her legs were stronger, and the cramps were becoming less frequent. But as the days passed, something else started to creep into her life that she hadn't anticipated: stress. It began subtly. There was the mounting pressure of work, the constant busyness of life, and the feeling that she was always trying to catch up. Though she had been focused on improving her physical health, her mental and emotional well-being seemed to be slipping through the cracks. Helen hadn't noticed at first, but as the weeks wore on, the strain became more noticeable. One morning, she woke up feeling particularly overwhelmed. The tension in her shoulders was unbearable, and the constant thoughts racing through her mind seemed to drown out everything else. As she stood up and shuffled to the kitchen, her legs felt more heavy than usual, not from cramps, but from the weight of stress. She rubbed her temples, trying to shake off the anxiety that had been building. The list of things to do seemed endless, and she felt exhausted just thinking about it. Her work deadlines were looming, her phone was constantly buzzing with emails and messages, and she was beginning to feel like she was drowning in responsibilities. As she sat down at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, Helen tried to ignore the tension in her mind. But it was hard. Her usual calm, patient self seemed distant, replaced by the constant hum of anxiety that filled every corner of her thoughts. When Megan called later that morning, Helen could barely muster the energy to talk. "Hey, Mom, how's everything going today?" Megan's cheerful voice came through the phone. Helen hesitated. "Honestly, I'm feeling a bit off today. My legs are fine, but I don't know. Everything just feels a little overwhelming." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Megan responded, her voice softening with concern. "I get it, Mom. I know you've been dealing with a lot lately. Maybe it's time to take a step back, breathe a little, and not put so much pressure on yourself. You've been making so much progress with your health, but mental health is just as important. Have you been taking care of that too?" Helen sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. "I haven't really thought about it that much. I've been so focused on my physical health that I didn't realize how much the stress has been affecting me." "Stress can really take a toll on your body," Megan explained. "It can make everything feel harder, even the things you've been working on. Maybe try some relaxation techniques. Do some deep breathing exercises, or even just take a walk without any expectations. Just to clear your mind." Helen nodded, though Megan couldn't see it. It made sense. She had been so focused on her legs, on her physical progress, that she hadn't taken the time to check in with her mind. The constant mental load had been draining, and it was starting to affect everything, even her physical health. Later that day, Helen decided to try something different. Instead of heading straight to her usual workout, she sat down in her living room and closed her eyes. She took a few deep breaths, letting her body relax with each exhale. The room was quiet, the only sound being the rhythmic breathing that soon calmed her nerves. It felt strange at first. She wasn't used to stillness. She was always doing something, walking, stretching, cooking, working. But this was different. It was time for her to just be. To simply exist in the present moment. She focused on her breath, allowing her mind to quiet. Slowly, she felt the tension in her shoulders begin to melt away. It wasn't a quick fix, but she could feel the weight starting to lift. When she opened her eyes, she realized that something had shifted. Her mind felt clearer, and her body seemed to follow suit. She stood up, feeling lighter, both physically and mentally. The anxiety wasn't gone, but it was more manageable now. The next day, Helen made a commitment to incorporate more relaxation into her routine. She didn't let stress take over her life, but instead learned how to balance it with moments of calm. She started practicing deep breathing before bed, took short walks during her lunch breaks, and even began meditating for a few minutes each morning. She also started paying more attention to her emotional well-being. When she felt overwhelmed, she would reach out to Megan or Sylvia for a chat, allowing herself to share her feelings rather than bottle them up. And, to her surprise, talking to someone she trusted always seemed to help put things into perspective. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Helen took a moment to sit outside on the porch with a cup of tea. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow across the sky. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the peacefulness of the moment wash over her. She realized that the stress had been a constant undercurrent in her life, a force she couldn't avoid. But now, she had learned how to manage it, how to take control of her thoughts and emotions instead of letting them control her. It was an ongoing practice, but she was getting better at it each day. Her physical health was important, but mental health was just as vital. She couldn't neglect one for the other. It was all connected, after all. The mind and body worked together, and it was up to her to nurture both. Helen smiled to herself, feeling a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. She was learning to live more mindfully, embracing both the highs and the lows. It wasn't always easy, but she was more resilient now. And that, she realized, was one of the greatest gifts she could give herself. Helen encounters an unexpected challenge, stress. While she had been focusing on her physical health, she neglected her mental and emotional well-being. After a conversation with Megan, she learns to incorporate relaxation and mindfulness techniques into her routine, which helps her manage stress and regain a sense of balance. This chapter emphasizes the importance of addressing both mental and physical health in the healing process. As the weeks rolled on, Helen felt a subtle but powerful shift within herself. Her legs were continuing to improve, her strength was building, and the occasional flare-up of discomfort seemed to be less frequent. But it wasn't just her body that was changing. It was her mindset, her approach to life, and her understanding of what true well-being meant. One sunny morning, as she sat at the kitchen table sipping her tea, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come. It had been months since she first began this journey, when she was barely able to take a walk around the block without cramping. Now, she was walking miles at a time, doing yoga regularly, and had adopted a routine that she felt proud of. Her legs felt stronger, and she had even started taking on small tasks around the house that she had once avoided, lifting boxes, rearranging furniture, and gardening. She felt more capable, more independent. And for the first time in a long time, Helen truly appreciated the strength her body had given her. But as she sat there, sipping her tea, she realized that this was not the end of her journey. It was simply a new chapter, one where she needed to find a sustainable balance between all the things that mattered to her. Her thoughts drifted to the practices that had helped her get this far. The vitamins, the stretches, the walks. But she realized that those alone were not enough. The work she had put into managing her stress, the mindfulness techniques she had adopted, and the self-compassion she had learned were just as important. It wasn't just about physical health, it was about holistic well-being. Balance, Helen whispered to herself. That's what I need. Over the past few weeks, Helen had come to appreciate how interconnected everything was. Her physical health didn't exist in a vacuum, it was deeply connected to her emotional and mental state. If she neglected one aspect of her life, it impacted the others. Stress could tighten her muscles, anxiety could make her more prone to cramping, and neglecting self-care could slow her progress. She thought about the moments when she had felt overwhelmed and frustrated. There were days when she felt like she wasn't making enough progress, days when her legs still ached or her mind felt cluttered with too many worries. But through those challenges, she had learned to be patient with herself. She had learned that healing, whether physical or emotional, took time, and that was okay. Helen realized that the journey wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about achieving an ideal state of health and then stopping. It was about continuous growth, about making the best choices each day and learning to adapt when things didn't go as planned. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to keep moving forward. That afternoon, Helen took a long walk through the neighborhood. As she strolled along, she admired the vibrant flowers in bloom, the green lawns, and the families out enjoying the sunny weather. It felt good to be outside, moving her body, breathing in the fresh air. It wasn't a race to the finish line, it was about enjoying the process. She found herself walking more slowly than usual, not out of fatigue but out of a sense of mindfulness. She wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. She wanted to savor the moment, to enjoy the feeling of her feet on the pavement, the warmth of the sun on her skin, and the peaceful rhythm of her breath. Helen thought about all the small steps she had taken to get here, the vitamins, the stretches, the mindful moments of self-care, and the emotional work she had done. Each of those steps had been part of a greater whole. They had all played a role in her healing, and she knew they would continue to guide her moving forward. When she returned home, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. For her body. For the strength she had rediscovered. For the relationships that had supported her. And most importantly, for the understanding that true wellness wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one that was ongoing, ever-evolving, and filled with new discoveries. That evening, as Helen sat down to a light dinner, Megan came over to check in. As they chatted about their day, Helen shared her thoughts. "I think I've finally figured it out," Helen said, a soft smile playing on her lips. "This whole journey isn't just about fixing one thing. It's about finding balance, between my physical health, my emotional well-being, and my mental peace. I used to think that if I just focused on my legs, everything else would fall into place. But I realize now that everything is connected. I need to take care of all of me, not just parts of me." Megan nodded thoughtfully. "That's such a great realization, Mom. I think the most important part of any journey is understanding that it's not about getting to a perfect place. It's about feeling good where you are and learning to adapt to whatever comes your way." Helen felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had spent so much of her life striving for perfection. Trying to control everything, trying to get everything right. But now, she knew that perfection was an illusion. What mattered was living in the moment, embracing the ups and downs, and taking care of herself along the way. As the night drew to a close, Helen thought about the future she was creating for herself. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, still moments where her body would feel tired or her mind would race with worries. But she also knew that she was stronger, more resilient, and more aware of what it took to live a balanced, healthy life. And for the first time in a long time, Helen felt a deep sense of peace. She didn't have to do it all perfectly. She just had to keep moving, one step at a time. For the past several weeks, Helen had been settling into a new rhythm. Her legs were stronger, her body more resilient, and her mind clearer. But despite her growing confidence, a lingering fear still clung to her, the fear of overexerting herself. She had come so far, and while she had learned to trust herself and her body more, there was always that voice in the back of her mind that whispered, "What if you push too hard? What if it all comes crashing down?" It had been a while since Helen had felt truly overwhelmed by the fear of pushing too hard. But this morning, as she prepared for a longer walk than usual, she couldn't shake the sense of hesitation that crept into her mind. The sun was already high in the sky, and the day was perfect for a walk through the park. She had already planned her route, stretching it to a full 3 miles, a distance she had never attempted before. As she pulled on her sneakers and laced them tightly, she paused, staring at the door. What if my legs aren't ready for this? What if I end up stuck halfway through? These thoughts circled in her mind like a storm cloud. Her legs had been feeling good lately. The cramps were rare, and she could walk farther and faster with each passing day. But could she handle the challenge of 3 miles? The last thing she wanted was to undo all her hard work by pushing too hard, too fast. Megan's voice echoed in her mind, "Don't let fear hold you back, Mom. You've made so much progress. Trust your body. Trust the journey." Helen closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She had worked hard to get to this point, and while she respected the limits of her body, she also knew it was time to challenge herself a little more. She opened her eyes and grabbed her water bottle. Today was the day. The first mile felt incredible. Her pace was steady, and her breathing was rhythmic. She passed familiar faces. Neighbors walking their dogs, children playing in the park, a couple jogging side by side. Helen smiled as she walked past them, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. It felt good to be outside, to be in motion, to feel the strength of her legs carrying her forward. The second mile was a bit more challenging. Helen's legs started to feel the strain, but she reminded herself to stay steady, to focus on her breathing. "You've done this before," she told herself. "Just keep going." She paused for a moment at the halfway mark to catch her breath. Her muscles were beginning to feel fatigued, but she didn't let that stop her. Instead, she took a few slow, deep breaths, stretching her calves gently. She took a sip of water and gave herself a mental pep talk. "I've got this. One step at a time." By the time Helen reached the final mile, she was starting to feel the discomfort in her legs, a familiar sensation of muscle fatigue, but not pain. She could tell she was pushing her limits, but it didn't feel like a setback. It felt like growth. She pushed through the discomfort, taking each step deliberately, focusing on how far she had come instead of how far she still had to go. As she neared the end of her walk, Helen couldn't help but smile. She had done it. She had completed the 3 miles, and though she was tired, she didn't feel defeated. She felt proud. When she got home, she took a few minutes to stretch, easing the tightness in her calves and hamstrings. Her legs felt like jelly, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from pushing yourself just enough to see what you're capable of. Megan called just as Helen was finishing her cool-down stretches. "Hey, Mom, how's the walk going?" she asked cheerfully. Helen chuckled, sinking down onto the couch as she wiped her forehead. "You know, it went better than I expected. I pushed myself to do 3 miles today, and I made it." Megan laughed. "That's awesome. I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard, and today you proved just how far you've come. But how are your legs feeling?" Helen smiled. "A little sore, but nothing I can't handle. It's a good kind of sore, you know. I feel like I've really accomplished something today." "That's the best kind of sore," Megan agreed. "You should be really proud of yourself, Mom. You're proving that you're stronger than you realize." Helen leaned back on the couch, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. She had been nervous at first, but she had trusted her body and pushed herself. And now, she could see just how far she had come. In that moment, Helen realized something important: she had learned to trust herself again. Not just in her ability to heal, but in her ability to listen to her body and make choices that empowered her. She knew when to push, when to rest, and when to challenge herself a little more. She was no longer afraid of progress, she was embracing it. As she relaxed into the couch, she thought about the future. There would be other challenges ahead, and there would be days when her legs felt heavy or her body needed rest. But she knew that each day was an opportunity to keep moving forward, to keep growing. One step at a time. She smiled to herself. She was ready for whatever came next. Helen woke up the next morning feeling the familiar twinge of soreness in her legs. After the 3-mile walk yesterday, her muscles were definitely working harder than they had in months. But it wasn't a bad kind of soreness. It was a sign that she had pushed herself beyond her usual limits, and her body was responding with a gentle reminder of the work she had done. She smiled to herself, stretching her legs out slowly as she lay in bed. For so long, she had been afraid of pushing herself too far, of feeling discomfort or fatigue. But now, she understood that soreness didn't mean failure. It meant progress. However, as Helen prepared for the day, she couldn't ignore the whispers of doubt that crept into her mind. Should I go for another walk today? Should I keep pushing? Or is it time to rest? For the past few weeks, Helen had felt a sense of momentum building within her. She had been making such great strides, and every day seemed like an opportunity to keep going, to do more. But this morning, her body was speaking to her, her muscles were tight, her joints felt a little stiff, and the thought of pushing herself again didn't feel right. As she made her way downstairs for breakfast, Helen couldn't help but think back to something Megan had said a few weeks ago: "You can't always keep going at full speed, Mom. Your body needs rest to rebuild, to get stronger." It had been hard for Helen to accept at first. She had been so focused on getting stronger that the idea of resting felt like giving up, like she wasn't doing enough. But over time, she had learned that rest was just as important as the work. Without proper recovery, her body wouldn't have the chance to repair itself, to grow stronger, and to be ready for the next challenge. Helen sat down at the kitchen table, her breakfast in front of her. The decision was clear: today would be a rest day. After breakfast, she stretched gently, letting the soreness in her legs release with each slow movement. She took a moment to listen to her body, focusing on what it was telling her. Today, it needed recovery, not exertion. She needed to honor that. Throughout the day, Helen made a conscious effort to embrace the idea of rest. She took a long, leisurely bath, letting the warm water soothe her muscles. She spent time reading, something she hadn't done much of lately, and even spent a few hours sitting in the garden, enjoying the fresh air and the quiet around her. It wasn't just physical rest, it was mental rest as well. Helen had always prided herself on being productive, on constantly moving from one task to the next. But as she sat in the garden, she allowed herself to simply be. She didn't need to accomplish anything today. She just needed to allow her body and mind to recover. Later in the day, Megan called. "How's everything going, Mom?" Helen chuckled softly. "It's going well. I'm actually taking a rest day today. My legs are sore from yesterday's walk, and I think I just need to give them some time to recover." "That's really smart," Megan replied. "I think you've been going hard for so long that your body is asking for a break. You've earned it. Listen to it." Helen smiled, grateful for her daughter's support. "It's just hard for me to slow down sometimes. I feel like I should always be doing something, always be making progress." "I totally get that," Megan said. "But sometimes, the best progress happens when we rest. It gives our bodies time to repair and rebuild. You'll be ready to tackle another challenge soon enough." Helen thought about Megan's words. She realized that taking rest didn't mean she was failing. It wasn't a sign of weakness, but a crucial part of the process. Rest allowed her body to heal, to strengthen itself, and to be prepared for the next challenge. As the evening approached, Helen felt a sense of gratitude for the slower pace of the day. Her legs still felt sore, but she could tell that the tension in her muscles had started to ease. She wasn't fully healed, but she felt like she was on the right path. Tomorrow, she would be ready to take another step forward, but for today, she was content with just being. Before bed, Helen stretched again, focusing on gentle movements that helped release any remaining tightness in her muscles. She didn't rush the process. She let her body move at its own pace, trusting that it knew what it needed. As she lay in bed that night, Helen thought about the journey she had been on. She had learned so much about her body, how to listen to it, how to challenge it, and most importantly, how to honor its need for rest and recovery. It wasn't always easy, but she had come to understand that taking a break wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a vital part of the process. With a deep breath, Helen closed her eyes, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had made incredible progress, and tomorrow, she would be ready for whatever came next. But for tonight, rest was enough. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon as Helen sat in her living room, reflecting on the week. She had been feeling stronger than ever lately, the pain in her legs had become a rare occurrence, and her muscles had grown more defined with each passing day. Yet, despite all the progress, there was still something she couldn't shake. A feeling that lingered in the back of her mind, quietly challenging her newfound confidence. She had been invited by a friend to join a hiking trip in the nearby mountains, and for the first time in a long while, she found herself hesitant. Hiking had always been something she enjoyed before her struggles with leg cramps and weakness began. She had loved the fresh air, the sense of adventure, and the feeling of accomplishment when reaching the top of a trail. But as she stared out the window, she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly ready to tackle something so physically demanding. Her body had made remarkable progress, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for the rugged terrain and steep climbs that came with a mountain hike. The thought of it made her stomach twist with a mix of excitement and fear. She wanted to say yes, wanted to prove to herself that she was capable, but there was a part of her that was afraid that her legs might give out, afraid that she'd find herself struggling to keep up with the group. She had been so focused on recovery, so determined to get stronger, that she had overlooked an important truth: there were still limitations she needed to accept. And that was okay. Helen stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the quiet street. It was a beautiful evening, and the soft orange light of the setting sun seemed to fill her with a sense of calm. She had come so far. She had learned to walk again, to stretch, to take care of herself. She had learned to trust her body and to listen to its signals. But there were still moments where she had to face the reality that she couldn't do everything, and that was a hard truth to accept. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Megan. "Are you still thinking about the hike? I know you've been wanting to get back out there. But if you're not sure, that's okay too. You've made so much progress already." Helen smiled at her daughter's thoughtful message. It was exactly what she needed to hear. Megan was right, she had made so much progress. And maybe that was enough for now. Maybe the mountain hike wasn't the right challenge for her today, and that was okay. Helen typed a quick reply: "I'm still thinking about it, but I'm not sure I'm ready for a full hike just yet. I'll sit this one out, but I'm proud of how far I've come." She set her phone down, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone, least of all herself. Her progress was already something to be proud of. The goal was never to push herself beyond her limits just for the sake of achievement. It was about listening to her body, about knowing when to push and when to pause. Over the next few days, Helen spent time reflecting on the idea of limitations. She realized that accepting her limits didn't mean giving up or admitting defeat. It meant being honest with herself, acknowledging the reality of where she was, and embracing the journey as it unfolded. She remembered the early days of her recovery when every step felt like a victory, when just walking to the mailbox seemed like a monumental achievement. Those small victories had led her here, to a place where she could feel strong and confident. But it was okay to acknowledge that there were still things she couldn't do, yet. Helen spent that weekend taking a walk in the park, her favorite route that she knew well. She took her time, savoring each step, enjoying the familiar sights and sounds. As she walked, she reflected on her journey. She had made so much progress, but there was still a long road ahead of her. And that was okay. It was in this realization that Helen felt a sense of peace. She no longer needed to prove herself by conquering every challenge in her path. Some days, it was enough just to keep moving forward, even if that meant taking smaller steps than she had planned. That evening, as she sat down for dinner, Megan called to check in. "How was your walk today?" she asked. "It was great," Helen replied. "I decided to sit the hike out this time. I think I'm just not quite ready for something that intense. But I'm okay with that. I'm proud of the progress I've made." "I'm so proud of you, Mom," Megan said warmly. "It's not about doing everything, it's about recognizing how far you've come and being kind to yourself. I think you've done an amazing job." Helen smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for her daughter's words. She knew Megan was right. She didn't need to prove anything. She just needed to keep going, to embrace the journey, and to be kind to herself along the way. As Helen sat back in her chair, she thought about the word limitations. It no longer felt like a barrier, instead, it felt like a guide. A guide that told her when to push, and when to pause. A guide that helped her honor her body, its needs, and its pace. She wasn't afraid of her limitations anymore. She had learned to respect them, and in doing so, she had discovered a new kind of strength, the strength to accept herself, fully and completely, exactly where she was. Helen had been feeling stronger physically for weeks, and while she had faced setbacks and doubts along the way, her body was undeniably responding to the care she had been giving it. Her legs no longer ached with every step, and the crippling fear of leg cramps had become less frequent, though still present at times. But what Helen hadn't expected was how much emotional healing was tied to her physical recovery. It had been a quiet Saturday morning when Helen sat on her porch, sipping her coffee and watching the world go by. The days had started to feel more peaceful, and the world around her seemed to slow down, just enough for her to breathe and reflect. As much as she had been focusing on her physical progress, something had been weighing on her that she hadn't fully processed, the emotions she had stored up during her years of pain. The realization hit her slowly, like a wave gently pulling her out to sea. She wasn't just healing physically. She was healing emotionally, too. And for the first time, she realized how much that healing was intertwined with the way she had been living, holding on to the fear, the frustration, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness that had haunted her for years. Helen remembered the long, sleepless nights she spent worrying about her condition. The fear of losing her independence, of not being able to take care of herself, of being a burden to others. There were moments when the pain in her legs had made her feel utterly defeated, like a shadow of the woman she once was. She had been fighting not just a physical ailment, but a deep emotional struggle. And it had taken its toll. As she sat there, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin, Helen allowed herself to feel the weight of those years of pain, the frustration, the fear, the loneliness. But instead of pushing those emotions down, she allowed them to surface. She didn't try to shut them out or deny them. She let herself feel all of it. Tears filled her eyes as memories from the past flooded back. The times she had felt weak and helpless. The moments she had watched her friends and family live their lives while she stayed in the background, unable to keep up. The moments of isolation when the pain had felt unbearable. It wasn't just the physical suffering that had hurt the most, it was the emotional toll that came with it. But as the tears fell, something shifted inside her. She felt a sense of release. For the first time, she allowed herself to mourn the years of hardship. She wasn't ashamed of it. She didn't need to hide from the pain anymore. And in that moment, Helen realized that it was okay to feel the weight of her journey. It didn't make her weak. It made her human. She took a deep breath and wiped away the tears, feeling lighter somehow, like a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. It was a catharsis, a breakthrough she hadn't expected. She wasn't just recovering from physical pain, she was recovering from the emotional scars that had lingered for so long. As she sat there, reflecting on everything she had been through, Helen felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had come so far, not just in terms of her strength, but in terms of her emotional resilience. Her body had healed, yes, but her heart had been healing too. And that was something she hadn't fully appreciated until now. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Megan. "How's your day going, Mom? Do you want to grab lunch later?" Helen smiled as she typed her response, "I'm doing well. Actually, I think I had a breakthrough today. I've been reflecting on everything I've been through, and I realized that healing is about more than just the body. I'm feeling a lot of emotions right now, but in a good way. It's like I'm letting go of a lot of pain I didn't even know I was holding on to." Megan replied almost immediately, "That's amazing, Mom. I'm really proud of you. Emotional healing is just as important as physical healing. You've been through so much, and I'm glad you're allowing yourself to feel and heal. Want to talk about it over lunch?" Helen felt a sense of warmth in her chest. Her daughter always knew just what to say. She typed back, "I'd love that. I think I'm ready to talk about it." Later that afternoon, Helen met Megan at their favorite cafe. As they sat down, Helen took a deep breath, her heart still open from the emotional breakthrough she had experienced that morning. "Megan, I've been thinking a lot," Helen began, her voice soft but steady. "I've been focusing so much on my legs, on the physical side of healing, but I've never really dealt with the emotions that came with all of this. The fear, the frustration, the feeling of being stuck in a body that wouldn't cooperate." Megan nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "I can't even imagine how hard that must have been for you, Mom. But I'm so proud of you for facing those emotions head-on." Helen smiled, grateful for her daughter's empathy. "It's been a long time coming, but I finally feel like I'm releasing all that pain. It's like I've been carrying it around for so long, and now, it's okay to let go." Megan reached across the table and took her hand. "You don't have to carry that anymore, Mom. You've made it through so much. You're so much stronger than you realize." Helen squeezed her hand, feeling the love and support that had always been there for her. "Thank you, Megan. For always being there. I'm starting to believe that maybe I can let go of the fear, of the hurt, and just focus on moving forward." As they chatted over lunch, Helen felt a deep sense of peace. She wasn't just healing physically. She was healing emotionally, too. And that was the breakthrough she had been waiting for all along. Helen had always been a private person. She didn't like to draw attention to herself, and for years, she had kept her struggles with leg cramps and physical limitations to herself. Her family knew, of course, but outside of her close circle, she had kept everything hidden, only showing the world the confident woman she once was. But as the weeks passed and her body continued to grow stronger, Helen realized that her journey could be more than just about her own recovery. Maybe, just maybe, it could be about helping others, people who were silently suffering, just like she had been. It started with a simple conversation at the local coffee shop, where she met an older woman named Margaret. Margaret was sitting alone at a table by the window, her hands shaking as she stirred her coffee. Helen noticed her right away. There was something familiar about Margaret. The way she sat, the way her shoulders slumped as if she was carrying a heavy weight. Helen hesitated for a moment, then decided to approach her. It was the kind of impulse that felt right, a little push from within. She walked over to Margaret's table and smiled gently. "Excuse me," Helen said softly. "I couldn't help but notice. You look like someone who might understand what it feels like to struggle with your legs." Margaret looked up, surprised but not unkind. She nodded slowly. "You could say that. I've been dealing with leg cramps and weakness for years. I don't go out much anymore. The pain makes it hard to do anything, really." Helen took a deep breath, deciding to share her story. "I know how you feel. For the longest time, I didn't know if I'd ever get my strength back. I had cramps constantly, and I felt like I was losing control of my body. But I've been on a journey, and I've learned some things that have helped me feel stronger. Maybe I could help. Margaret raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. I've tried everything. I've seen doctors, gone through treatments, taken all the vitamins they told me to. Nothing works. Helen sat down across from her, her voice soft but firm. I understand. I've been there. It's frustrating, and it feels like there's no way out. But what I've learned is that recovery is about more than just taking pills or seeing specialists. It's about changing your lifestyle, listening to your body, and knowing when to ask for help. I started by focusing on my nutrition, specifically vitamins that support muscle health. And I didn't stop there. I made sure to incorporate stretching, gentle movement, and self-care into my daily routine. Margaret looked at Helen with a mixture of skepticism and hope. But how did you know what would work for you? I don't have the energy to try another thing that won't work. Helen smiled softly. It wasn't easy, but I took it one step at a time. I didn't try to do everything at once. I started with the basics, the right vitamins, simple stretches, and focusing on hydration. And slowly, I began to feel better. The cramps became less frequent, my strength started to return. But the most important thing I learned is this: you have to be patient with yourself. You won't heal overnight. But little by little, you can get stronger. Margaret was silent for a moment, processing Helen's words. I don't know. It sounds like a lot of work. Helen nodded. It is. But you don't have to do it alone. I can help you find the right path for your recovery. You have to be kind to yourself and give yourself the grace to heal, even when it feels hard. Margaret looked at her with tears welling in her eyes. Maybe I've been too hard on myself. Maybe I'm afraid that I won't get better, that this is just how it is for me now. Helen reached out and gently patted Margaret's hand. It's okay to feel that way. I felt the same way at one point. But I'm proof that it's possible to feel better, even after years of struggle. You don't have to do it all alone, and you don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take one step, then another. Margaret smiled through her tears. Thank you, she whispered. I think I needed to hear that more than anything. Helen felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long while, she realized that her journey was not just for herself. Her experience, her recovery, could help others. And that was a gift she hadn't fully appreciated until now. Over the next few weeks, Helen and Margaret met regularly, talking about recovery strategies, sharing experiences, and supporting each other through the ups and downs. Helen began to feel a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt before. Her physical recovery had given her strength, but it was the emotional healing that had truly transformed her. Now, she could offer that same healing to others. Helen also started attending a local support group for seniors dealing with leg cramps and mobility issues. She didn't just sit back and listen, she became an active participant, offering advice, encouragement, and sharing her story with the others. It was a small group, but each time they met, Helen felt a sense of fulfillment. She was no longer just a woman struggling with her own pain. She was a beacon of hope for those who needed it. In the support group, Helen met others like Margaret, people who had spent years struggling in silence, afraid to hope for something better. Slowly, as they shared their stories, they began to lift each other up. Helen found herself becoming a guide, a source of inspiration for people who needed to know that recovery was possible, that healing wasn't a distant dream, but a reality they could reach for. One evening, after a particularly uplifting meeting, Megan called Helen. How was the group today? It was amazing, Helen replied, her voice full of warmth. I think I'm finally starting to see the bigger picture. It's not just about me anymore. It's about helping others. I can share what I've learned, and maybe it will help someone else feel stronger, too. Megan smiled on the other end of the line. You're making such a difference, Mom. I'm so proud of you. Helen smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She wasn't just healing for herself. She was healing for others, too. And in doing so, she had discovered a new purpose, one that would carry her through the rest of her recovery and beyond. Helen stood in front of her bedroom mirror one evening, looking at herself in a way she hadn't in years. She wasn't looking for flaws or counting the lines of age on her face. Instead, she was taking in the full picture, the woman who had faced pain, fear, and limitations, and had emerged stronger for it. Her legs, once so weak and prone to cramping, were now more stable. The tightness in her muscles had eased, and she felt the energy in her body that she hadn't felt in so long. But it wasn't just her body that had changed. It had taken time for Helen to understand that healing wasn't just about her legs, her bones, or her muscles. It was about the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. She had started this journey with a focus on her physical health, but she had come to realize that true recovery meant looking at all aspects of her being. Her emotional well-being, her mental strength, and even her spiritual health had played crucial roles in her healing. It had been a process, a slow and sometimes painful process, of digging deep within herself. She had faced old fears, old wounds, and old beliefs that had kept her stuck for years. But now, as she looked at herself, she saw a woman who was whole, who had made peace with the parts of her that she had once rejected. She wasn't perfect, but she was healing, and that was enough. As Helen looked at her reflection, a soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Megan, holding a cup of tea in her hand and a warm smile on her face. "Mom, I brought you something," Megan said, stepping into the room. She set the cup of tea on the bedside table before giving her mom a quick hug. "How are you feeling today?" Helen smiled and wrapped her arms around Megan. "I'm good. Better than I've felt in a long time. I've been reflecting a lot lately." Megan raised an eyebrow. "Reflecting about what?" Helen pulled back slightly, looking at her daughter with a deep sense of gratitude. "Reflecting on how far I've come. It's been a long journey, and I've been thinking about the fact that healing isn't just about fixing one part of yourself. It's about embracing all of you. I've learned that my recovery isn't just physical. It's emotional. It's spiritual. And honestly, I think that's what's made the biggest difference." Megan smiled warmly, taking a seat on the bed next to her. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. You've been through so much, and you've come out the other side stronger than ever. I think the fact that you've embraced this whole journey, all of it, is really powerful." Helen nodded, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's true. I've learned that my body isn't the enemy. For years, I fought against my own body, blaming it for my pain, my limitations. But I've come to realize that it's not about fighting against yourself. It's about working with yourself, accepting yourself, and allowing healing to happen from within. And that's not just physical healing. It's emotional healing, too." Megan reached out and took her mom's hand, a comforting gesture that spoke volumes. "I think that's something we all need to remember, that healing takes time, and it's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about becoming whole again." Helen squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling a deep sense of peace. "Exactly. I used to think I needed to fix myself, that something was wrong with me. But now I see that I've always been whole. I just needed to give myself permission to heal, to let go of the guilt, the shame, and the fear." As they sat together, sipping the tea Megan had brought her, Helen felt a profound shift inside. She had spent so many years pushing through her pain, trying to ignore the emotional toll it took on her. But now, as she sat in the quiet of her room, she understood that true healing had come from within. It wasn't just the vitamins and exercises that had made the difference. It was the acceptance of herself, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the patience to trust the process. Helen had been through a lot: physical pain, emotional struggles, fear, and doubt. But through it all, she had discovered something invaluable: her own resilience. She had come to understand that recovery was not a linear process. There were setbacks, yes, but each setback was an opportunity to grow. And even when things didn't go according to plan, Helen had learned how to stay grounded and hopeful. Her journey had also taught her the importance of connection. She had found strength in her relationships with others, her daughter Megan, her friends, and the people in the support group she had been attending. She realized that healing wasn't something to be done in isolation. It was a collective experience. The support of others, the sharing of stories, and the encouragement of those who understood her pain had been crucial in her recovery. As Helen looked out the window, she saw the world outside continuing on with its busy rhythm. People were walking, driving, living their lives, and she felt a sense of belonging. She was no longer a bystander in her own life, watching others from the sidelines. She was active, she was strong, and she was fully present. She had found a balance in her life that allowed her to embrace both the joys and challenges of living fully. "I've been thinking a lot about what's next," Helen said, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "I've been focusing on myself, and that's been important. But now, I want to take what I've learned and share it with others. I want to help people who are going through the same thing I went through, people who are struggling with their health, their bodies, their emotions. I want to show them that recovery is possible, no matter how hard it seems." Megan's eyes brightened with pride. "You've always had such a big heart, Mom. I know you'll make a difference. You've already made a difference in my life." Helen smiled, feeling the love and support of her daughter wash over her. "I just want to give back. I want to be a source of hope for others, just like people were for me." As the evening drew on, Helen felt a deep sense of contentment. She had come so far, and yet, she knew the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, and more moments of doubt. But now, she had the tools to face them. She had the strength to keep moving forward, knowing that healing was not a destination, but a continuous process of growth and acceptance. Helen had never imagined herself as a leader. It wasn't something she aspired to, nor did she ever seek the spotlight. But now, standing in front of a room filled with people from all walks of life, she felt something different. She wasn't just talking about her personal journey anymore. She was sharing a message of hope, one that was grounded in experience, strength, and resilience. The local community center had invited Helen to speak at their health and wellness seminar for seniors. It was an event designed to provide information on various health issues, from managing chronic pain to maintaining an active lifestyle. At first, Helen had been hesitant. Speaking in front of a crowd was not something she was comfortable with, and yet, the more she thought about it, the more she realized this was another step in her healing journey, one that would allow her to help others in ways she never imagined. As she stood backstage, her hands trembled slightly, but her heart was steady. She had prepared her speech for days, carefully crafting the words she wanted to share. But it wasn't just the speech that mattered, it was the authenticity she would bring to the room. She wasn't just going to talk at them. She was going to speak with them, from her heart. The moment came when the event coordinator called her name. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Helen Thompson." Helen walked onto the stage, her steps measured but purposeful. The audience gave her a polite round of applause, and she smiled, feeling a rush of nervous energy. She took a deep breath and began, her voice steady but warm. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Helen Thompson, and I'm here to share my story with you. I'm not a doctor or a health expert, but I've been where many of you are right now. I've struggled with leg cramps, weakness, and the frustration of not being able to do the things I once loved. I know what it's like to feel trapped in your own body." Helen paused, allowing her words to sink in. She could see the nods from the audience, people who knew exactly what she was talking about. "I spent years dealing with pain, but I also spent years ignoring my body, blaming it for what was happening. It wasn't until I started listening to it, nurturing it, and making some small but important changes that things began to shift. And today, I want to share what I've learned with you." Helen continued, speaking about her journey, the vitamins she had incorporated into her routine, the lifestyle changes that had helped her regain her strength, and the importance of maintaining a positive outlook. She spoke from a place of deep authenticity, not as someone who had all the answers, but as someone who had walked the path and found hope along the way. She could see the impact her words were having on the audience. Their faces softened, some of them even wiped away a tear, as they connected with her message. She wasn't just sharing information. She was offering a sense of understanding and empathy that only someone who had experienced similar struggles could provide. After the seminar, people approached Helen, eager to talk about their own challenges. One woman, named Barbara, came up to her with a smile that barely hid the emotion behind it. "I've been dealing with these leg cramps for years," Barbara said, her voice thick with gratitude. "I tried so many things, but nothing worked. Hearing your story today, it felt like you were speaking directly to me. I'm going to try those vitamins you mentioned and take better care of myself. I think it's time I start listening to my body." Helen smiled warmly, feeling a surge of pride. "It's never too late to start," she said. "Remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Every small step counts." Another man, Thomas, in his late 70s, approached her with a different kind of question. "Helen, I've been active all my life. But the pain in my legs has really taken a toll on me recently. I'm not used to slowing down. What do you suggest for someone who wants to stay active but feels like his body is starting to give out?" Helen thought for a moment, offering a piece of advice that had helped her through similar challenges. "Start slow, Thomas. Even small movements, like stretching and walking, can make a big difference. The key is consistency. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength." As the event wrapped up, Helen felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had not only shared her journey, but she had also inspired others to take charge of their health and well-being. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift she could give, the gift of hope and empowerment. A few days later, Helen received an invitation to lead a monthly support group for seniors in her community. The group would be focused on sharing resources, providing mutual encouragement, and discussing ways to maintain physical and emotional health. Helen didn't hesitate for a moment. She knew that this was the next step in her journey, a chance to give back in a meaningful way and to continue to grow as a person. Helen began preparing for the first meeting with the same care and attention she had given to her seminar speech. She made a list of topics to cover, including the importance of hydration, the benefits of gentle exercise, and the need for regular health checkups. But more importantly, she planned to create a space where people could feel safe to share their struggles and successes, a place where they could learn from each other and find strength in community. The first meeting was a success, with a dozen seniors showing up to share their experiences and listen to Helen's insights. It was a small group, but Helen knew that it was just the beginning. As she watched people open up and offer advice to one another, she realized that the support they were giving each other was just as important as the practical strategies she shared. Helen had become a mentor, a guide, and a source of inspiration for people who were navigating similar challenges. It was a role she had never expected to take on, but one that had brought her immense satisfaction. She felt fulfilled not only because she had found healing for herself but because she was able to share that healing with others. She wasn't just a survivor of her circumstances, she was a leader, helping others find their way through the same struggles she had faced. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes, the greatest strength comes from helping others discover their own potential for healing and growth. Helen stood at the window of her living room, gazing out at the quiet neighborhood streets as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world was peaceful, yet her mind was alive with thoughts of the past few years. She had come so far from where she once was, trapped in her own body, unable to move without pain, and often feeling isolated in her struggles. But now, as she looked back, she saw not just a story of recovery, but one of growth, strength, and community. It was a Saturday evening, and she was preparing for the next session of the senior support group she had been leading. She had become a familiar presence at the local community center, where every month, more and more people came to share their experiences and find ways to improve their health. The group had grown from a handful of people to a thriving community of seniors who supported one another. It wasn't just about physical health anymore, it was about nurturing emotional well-being, building relationships, and finding joy in life again. Her phone buzzed with a new message, and Helen picked it up. It was a text from Megan. "Hey, Mom. I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of everything you're doing. I've seen such a change in you, and I know you're making a difference in so many lives. You're really a light for others. I love you. Sparkling heart." Helen smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest as she read the words. Megan had been her rock throughout this entire journey. At first, it had been Helen who leaned on her daughter, but now, it was Megan who often marveled at the strength her mother had found. The roles had shifted, and Helen had embraced her newfound sense of purpose, one that went beyond her own healing. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock at the door. It was Marie, one of the regular attendees of the support group. Marie had been struggling with her own health issues, her legs were weak, her joints ached, and she had felt hopeless for so long. But over the past year, Helen had watched Marie's transformation. Slowly but surely, she had begun to regain her strength, not just physically but emotionally, too. "Hi, Helen. I brought some homemade cookies for tonight's meeting," Marie said, holding up a container with a beaming smile. "Marie, you didn't have to," Helen said, laughing. "But thank you. You're always so generous." As they shared a moment of laughter, Marie set the cookies down and looked at Helen with a grateful expression. "You've really changed my life, Helen. You know that, right?" Helen felt a lump in her throat. "I don't know about that," she said softly, "but I'm glad I've been able to help." Marie shook her head, her eyes full of emotion. "No, really. Before I came to your group, I felt like I was just waiting for the end. I was so tired, physically and mentally. But you taught me that it's not about waiting for the end, it's about making the most of every day. You've given me hope again. I'm walking more, moving more, and I'm even thinking about taking up knitting again, something I loved to do before my health got in the way." Helen smiled, touched by the words. "That's what it's all about, Marie. Every little bit counts. You're doing the work, and you're not giving up. And that's the most important thing." The two women sat down together, sipping tea and chatting about life. Helen realized that these moments, the quiet conversations, the shared experiences, the support of the group, were what had become her new purpose. She wasn't just helping people manage their leg cramps or strengthen their bodies. She was helping them find joy again, reconnect with their passions, and rediscover the beauty of life. Later that evening, as Helen stood in front of the group, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The room was filled with familiar faces, each one carrying their own stories of struggle and resilience. But in this space, they were all united by a common goal: to heal, to grow, and to thrive. "Tonight," Helen began, "I want to talk about something that's been on my mind lately. It's about legacy. When we talk about healing, we often think about the physical aspects, the pain that fades, the mobility that improves. But I've come to realize that healing is about more than just our bodies. It's about our hearts, our minds, and our relationships with others." She paused, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of each person present. We all have our stories. We've all faced challenges. But the most beautiful thing about healing is that it's something we get to share. Each time we support someone else, each time we offer a word of encouragement or a listening ear, we are leaving a legacy. It's a legacy of kindness, of strength, and of hope. And that, I believe, is what really matters. The room was silent for a moment, and then one by one, people nodded, their faces illuminated by the light of understanding. Helen realized that this group, this small community she had helped build, was her legacy. It wasn't about a grand achievement or a big recognition. It was about the quiet, powerful connections that had been made, the lives that had been touched, and the healing that had spread far beyond her own journey. As the meeting came to a close, people lingered, talking and laughing, sharing cookies and stories. Helen watched them, a deep sense of peace settling over her. She had come so far from the woman who had once felt broken and defeated. Now, she was part of something bigger, a community that was healing together. Helen thought about all the people she had met along the way, those who had shared their wisdom and their struggles with her. She had learned so much from them, and now, it was her turn to pass on that knowledge. The ripple effect of her healing would continue, not just through the support group, but through the people she had touched, people who would go on to help others in turn. Helen's legacy wasn't just in the work she had done or the lessons she had shared. It was in the lives that had been transformed by her example of courage, compassion, and resilience. She had found her purpose, and in doing so, she had inspired others to find theirs. As she closed her eyes that night, Helen felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey she had been on. She had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty, but she had come through it all, stronger and more connected than ever. She had learned that healing was a process, not a destination, and that the journey itself was worth every step. And in the quiet of her heart, Helen knew that her work was far from over. There were still lives to touch, still hearts to inspire. The legacy of healing she had started would continue, a legacy that would live on, one small step at a time. In this final chapter, Helen reflects on the legacy she is creating through her work in the community. She understands that healing is not just about personal recovery but about sharing that healing with others and creating a ripple effect of hope. Her journey has come full circle, from feeling broken and isolated to becoming a source of strength and inspiration for others. With the conclusion of Helen's journey, we see that healing is not a destination, but a continuous process of growth, connection, and giving back. Her story is a testament to the power of resilience, community, and the ability to find purpose even in the most challenging times. That concludes Helen's story. Would you like me to help you with anything else, or is there another direction you'd like to explore? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?